The New York Jets, their offseason in 60 seconds. But we're editorializing in the comments here. Aaron Rodgers rebuffs RFK Jr.'s overtures, retains his job as the Jets quarterback. New signings. Mike Williams comes in on a 1-year deal. Tyrod Taylor, John Simpson on a 2-year deal. Javon Kinlaw on a 1-year deal. Tyron Smith on a 1-year deal. Traded for Hassan Reddick, who still has not shown up and remains a holdout. Acquired Morgan Moses from the Ravens to be their right tackle. Lost Bryce Huff to the Eagles, Jordan Whitehead to the Bucks, Quentin Jefferson to the Browns, Mekhi Becton goes to the Eagles, traded John Franklin Myers and Zach Wilson to the Broncos. Notable draft picks: drafted offensive tackle Olu Fashanu in the first round, lost their second-round pick in the Rodgers trade, and drafted Malachi Corley in the third round. The blue chip check-in for the New York Jets, how many did you have?
I think 5. I'm going to start with Quentin Williams, obviously incredible player. Tyron Smith, when he's healthy, is very much still in that category. He was incredible last year. Sauce Gardner, another easy one. Garrett Wilson has had 2,000-yard seasons with not very good quarterback play, so I'm willing to put him in that category. And then Breece Hall, when he's healthy, man, is one of the most explosive backs in the league. And so I know there's probably not that many running backs we're going to put into this category, but he's at least already proven that he can be that caliber of player. So
I think those 5 are totally fine. No arguments here. What about Quincy Williams?
really good player, probably in the next category for me, because for as good as he is and as fast as he is, he still has a little bit of like the scatterbrain that I can't get all the way there with. And I think CJ Mosley does do a little bit of almost the Roquan Smith effect of keeping him in check the way that Patrick Queen was kept in check. But he is a really good player. I don't want to take away from him.
I was just giving you the floor to throw another linebacker in there. You chose not to take it. The red chip category, I'd throw DJ Reed in there. Like, I think DJ Reed has been really good over the last few years. If he's your second corner, you're in a really good spot. And talking about ascending players, which is a category I've just randomly thrown in as we've continued to do these, I think Jermaine Johnson and AVT probably qualify there. If Elijah Vera Tucker can stay healthy, he's a guy that I'm really excited to watch this season, and I'm really hoping he can stay on the field. What significant question marks does this depth chart have in your mind?
I would say it's not great that the guy who is supposed to be your best pass rusher off the edge has not reported to camp and continues to lose money for fun, I guess. I don't really understand what is going on there. And then outside of the very tippy top of your receiver core, I'm a little bit worried about what we have here. You know, Aaron Rodgers is willing to feed his number one guy anyway, so maybe that's not as big of a deal here as it would be in other places, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, wide receiver depth seems like a concern. When Mike Williams is your number 2 and he's starting the season on like the Breece Hall rehabilitation plan where he's going to come along slowly, and then you're dealing with like Alan Lazard and Corley and Xavier Gibson, like that thing could get rough in a hurry, which I'm sure we'll revisit here. I would say secondary depth as well. You know, just corner and safety. I think Ashton Davis has played a little bit for them, but they're moving Isaiah Oliver to safety. He's their 4th one. And then the cornerback depth, if either of those guys has to miss time, that'd be something I'd be a little bit worried about. But that feels nitpicky. I mean, this roster is in pretty good shape without a rash of injuries. What are you watching in the first month of the season with the Jets?
There is a world where this offensive line is really good. And I'm kind of curious to see how many of those dominoes fall for them to actually get there. Because obviously, if Tyron is playing at the level he was at last year and he's healthy, really, really good left tackle. John Simpson, I think, is a little bit of an upgrade for them. He's not a great player, but he's a little bit of an upgrade. Joe Tipman, can he take a little bit of a step at center? Elijah Vera Tucker, if he's fully healthy and playing at the level I think he can play at, that's really good. Even Morgan Moses at right tackle, not the best, but if that's your worst starter up front, you're probably in a decent spot. And so, and even Olu Fashanu, who is a first round pick that they are not having to play, like inevitably he will probably have to play for Tyron at some point, or maybe they play him in place of Moses. I don't know. But if he can give them anything when he has to hit the field, like there is a world where this offensive line is really good. Let's just see how many of those dominoes fall.
Drafting Fashanu where they did, I think there's a reason that you do that. It's because it protects you and allows that contingency plan if you do have a couple injuries for this to still be a strength of the team. And based on the way that he played in the preseason, that does feel like the case. He has an elbow strain right now, but it seems like he'll be back sooner rather than later. And Zach Rosenblatter does a great job covering the Jets for us. He wrote that Fashanu was getting snaps at right tackle as well later in camp, because I think that in their minds, it might have been Max Mitchell as like the right backup right tackle, with Fashanu being more on the left side. But I think that he was good enough that they were like, if we get an injury at either tackle spot, he's going to be our best answer. So the fact that you have that as a swing tackle, a guy you drafted in the top 11 it's a pretty good place to be considering the flashes that he's shown. So I'm with you. I'm excited about what this group can be. If Vera Tucker stays healthy and you only miss a little bit of time from one of the tackles and you have a backup that you feel good about, this does feel like it can be a real strength for this team. What I'm watching the first month of the season is, what is Aaron Rodgers? Like, what does Aaron Rodgers have left? All of their eggs are in the Aaron Rodgers basket.
Let me start with this. How good did you think he was the last time we saw him full time?
So here's my biggest thing with this. Physically, I think he was fine. He was still making all the throws that you wanted him to make. He was just over it. He was completely disengaged. He was playing with that young receiver core. He just did not want to be a part of whatever was going on there. And if you're spinning this in the optimistic way for the Jets, you talk yourself into being like, if he's engaged physically, if we saw what we saw in 2022, he can still be a really, really good quarterback. The problem is that was 2 years ago and he tore his Achilles last year. So what is he physically now, combined with, some of the engagement concerns that we've seen over the last few years? And their eggs are all in the Aaron Rodgers basket in more ways than one, right? It not only is about the play he's going to give you as the quarterback, your offensive coordinator, who did not do a good job last year, is only in that role because Aaron Rodgers is still on the team. So you need him to not only be a plus quarterback for you, you need him to raise the floor of the infrastructure for your offense in the ways that we've seen with guys like Manning, like Brady, late in their careers when they switch spots. So can he be like the quasi coordinator and a top 12-ish quarterback in order for you to get where you want to go? I don't think that's totally off the table. I just think it's a very risky bet at this stage of his career. And if it doesn't hit, I don't really know where that leaves this team.
That's the thing. A lot of things need to go right in succession for this to actually work. And if even one of them goes wrong, it could go right. Like if, let's say he's mentally there and he's engaged and all that stuff, but he doesn't look right coming off the Achilles. Okay, we probably don't get there. Or vice versa. He looks fine coming off the Achilles, but maybe for whatever reason, mentally he's not there and the offense isn't as sophisticated as it could be. Like if one of these little factors falls away, they could have issues. And then if, I just said the offensive line could be really good, but in the world where some of those guys get injured again, or maybe they don't play as well as they could, and Rodgers is under a lot more pressure, maybe this doesn't work out as well. So like there's a lot that needs to go right for this.
I'll ask you the same question. What did you think of Rodgers the last time that you saw him as a full-time player?
I thought he was more like quarterback 10 or 11. And the biggest difference to me was one, like you said, just mentally checked out, which totally understand. And we'd seen that from Rodgers before, right? Where like at the end of the McCarthy era, he was pretty checked out. And then they got LaFleur and he kind of got reinvigorated, won 2 straight MVPs. So we've seen him bounce back from that.
But the question is, how many times can that happen? Can that just keep happening over and over again now that he's going to be 41 years old?
When you are one of the best quarterbacks in the world, like ever, I'm willing to give you some. I'll see. I'll let the season play out. Like I'll give you some time to prove that. My bigger concern is the Achilles, man, because I even think when he played last his full time, he started to lose the mobility. That was the one area I think physically it started to go away, and so now he's closer to 40, coming off the Achilles.
He is 40. He turns 41 in December. Yes.
Oh, I thought he was still like 38, 39 territory. That's crazy.
No, he is 40 years old. He turns 41 years old in like 3 months.
See, now I'm a little bit more concerned. A 40-year-old coming off the Achilles. Like it was.
This is the opinion of a 27-year-old man that's like, oh, that guy's 40. He might as well be dead.
I mean, this is the one position where maybe you don't have to be dead, but like you probably are dead as an NFL athlete at 40. Come on now.
As I get older, as I'm like definitively in my late 30s now, I've just decided that I'm gonna believe in Aaron Rodgers. Like the fact that I'm 37, I'm more open to the idea that you could be successful and thriving as you turn 40 and get there. All right, let's get to what's keeping us up at night. What are you worried about as you think about this Jets team this year?
Your best pass rusher is letting money slip away because he doesn't want to show up to camp. That's a big problem. And listen, that's a big problem for anybody, right? We could say that if your best pass rusher on any team isn't showing up, big problem. It's an even bigger problem when your whole defense is built out of, hey, we're going to rush forward and our guy off the edge is going to be really, really good. Well, if you don't have the guy who's supposed to be the ace off the edge, this whole thing starts to fall apart. So I'm very concerned about when they're going to get him back, number one. And two, if they get him back, what are they even getting from him? Like how, we just talked about Rodgers being mentally checked in or out. Where is Reddick going to be when he gets here? So it's just a lot of questions on that front.
I also think just the front four in general has more questions than it has in recent years. You're really relying on a guy like Javon Kinlaw. And even if Reddick is a starter for you, now you have him, Will McDonald, and Michael Clemens is still like a big body, but John Franklin Myers played a lot of snaps for this team last year, like 285 pounds. So if Reddick is now your starting defensive end in those looks, you got a lot smaller on early downs. Like, what does the run defense look like, even with the players you want out there? They deserve the benefit of the doubt. We've talked about this with offensive lines, whether it's the Ravens or the Packers or the Cowboys. Like, institutionally, we believe they will figure this out. I think the Jets deserve that along the defensive line and on defense specifically, but I still have some lingering questions about how it all looks in practice compared to the construction of that room over the last couple of years.
Yeah, Saleh is definitely a guy I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, he could probably develop a guy, or they'll get more out of this unit than they could. But it's just, they're kind of almost in, if Reddick isn't the star they think he is, they're almost where the Bills were like 2 years ago, where it's like, all right, they have a lot of guys, but where is the actual star off the edge? And that's the thing that holds them back from being a top 5 versus like, top 10 pass rush unit.
I will say this, in fairness to them, Quinnen Williams is the
Yeah.
star. And that's why you're okay. That this team hasn't had a 12-sack guy coming off the edge over the last few years. It has been like a hodgepodge of guys. I just wonder if the hodgepodge is not necessarily the same quality that it's been over the last few seasons, and what does that eventually mean for you? I'm curious. I think, would you think that who's more dug in your mind? Is it Hassan Reddick or Trent Williams? Trent Williams openly talking about or leaking that he's just playing golf and loving life right now. That feels like a man who is just not going to back off his spot no matter what.
I think it should be Trent Williams. He's Trent Williams. They have to pay you. Like a Reddick, I mean, I guess the Jets are in a spot where they're going to have to pay him and eventually concede to whatever. But like Trent Williams has done everything you can do to prove yourself and prove your worth as a player over more than a decade. So Trent should do whatever he wants to do until week 1 starts.
So Hassan Reddick has made $51 million playing NFL football. I believe Trent Williams has made $150 million, $168 million. So I think it's a little bit easier for Trent to pay those fines every single day and kind of dig into his spot right now. If I had $170 million in career earnings, you would never see me again. So good for
never.
Especially you. You'd be playing golf every single day if you had $170 million. You would be Trent Williams right now.
I'd be oscillating between playing games and then going and playing golf. Exactly.
What's keeping me up at night, again, this is nitpicky, and you could say this for a lot of teams, but I do think it is more applicable to this team and their history. What would a couple non-fluky, like reasonably predictable injuries mean for this team? I'm less worried about Tyron Smith because of Fashanu. I think that is a really good contingency plan. But let's just say AVT goes down again, and you're going from him to Wes Schweitzer. Okay, now you're chipping in there a little bit. And let's say you missed 4 games from Tyron Smith and Fashanu, or maybe let's say you missed 8 games from Tyron Smith. And Fashanu's good, but he's not Tyron Smith. So now it's like, okay, this goes from being a borderline top 8 offensive line to an average offensive line. And then the same thing happens to your receiving group. Mike Williams gets hurt. And now you're down to Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard and Malachi Corley. And it's like, that's my concern, is that does that happen enough times over the course of the offense that it's not a disaster, it's not catastrophic, but you're going from a top 12-ish offense in the best case scenario to hunting for slightly below average. And what does that mean for the ceiling of this team? And I know that you can say this for every team. What if they get hurt? What if they get hurt? And that's not that interesting. But when the guys that you're counting on are consistently hurt, that feels different to me.
That's the thing, is that these are guys who have been consistently hurt. The quarterback, your running back is coming off of an injury. 2 or 3 of your offensive linemen. Mike Williams has basically played a half a season for as long as he's been in the NFL. You're not just banking on the randomness of injury. You're saying, okay, these guys have been hurt consistently before. Probably more likely than not, at least a couple of them will again. And this is already a team that, even without injury, I think is kind of a fragile build just in terms of what needs to go right, let alone if a couple of guys have to end up missing significant time.
Yeah, even if Mike Williams was somebody that was healthy all the time, you're still bringing in like a 30-year-old receiver to play a huge role within this offense. And I think we have to mention the fact that Brees Hall is an incredible pass catcher. Like he's going to be a part of this passing game. And so even if you're a little bit weaker receiver, you do have somebody in that role who can help you, but it's still a lot easier to live with 2 or 3 reliable receivers on the field than it is without it. What are you most excited about watching with this year's Jets team?
This backfield is really cool, man. I actually really like what they got going on. Brees Hall, one of the most explosive players in the NFL with the ball in his hands. I mean, that's a pretty fun thing to me. He's one of those guys where there's just kind of a way that he has to navigating the second level where he just knows how to bounce off of a guy. And then when he does, he puts his foot in the ground, he's instantly accelerated. He's at 60 miles an hour again, and he's gone. Like that's kind of his superpower. And then Braylon Allen, he's billed as this big, he looks like Derrick Henry, all this other stuff. He's almost more of his vision and his feet are kind of his best traits. Like he's a guy who actually does a really good well of like switching lanes and understanding how to navigate space at the second level. So he's not really a bruiser, but he's one of those players where he's almost an optical illusion and it kind of makes him fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I just think Brees Hall in a functional NFL offense is something to look forward to. And I feel the same way about Garrett Wilson. Like the
Yeah.
idea that we could see Garrett Wilson with a real NFL quarterback, like him and Brees Hall, that combination, I am very excited to see that with not one of the worst 3 offenses in the league like it's been the last couple of years. So mine is sort of connected to that. I'm excited to see this defense play in football games that matter because in the fact that they were able to maintain their level of play the way that they have over the last couple of seasons is a goddamn miracle. They were second in defensive success rate over the second half of last year. They were second in weighted defensive DVOA. During that same span, they were dead last in offensive success rate behind Carolina. So to have the worst offense in the league down to down and still be able to play at that level on defense, which requires buy-in, it requires effort, that is remarkable to me.
Shout out to Robert Sullivan to keep those
Yes.
guys in line all the way through December when it gets cold up there in New York. Like it's for them to be able to do what they do throughout the season when you have literally the worst offense in the league and like a quarterback who, especially last year, where they very obviously go out and trade for Aaron Rodgers to not have Zach Wilson play quarterback because everybody in the building knows this is bad, and then Zach Wilson has to play quarterback again. How do you keep everybody in
You can't
check?
even manufacture belief. Like you can't even manufacture false belief in that build because of the moves that you have made. And the fact that they still had that buy-in by the end of the year. The Patriots are the same way. The
Yeah.
Patriots defense was incredible in the back half of last season, even as their offense was not functional. The couple more stats I thought were funny. The Jets were 31st in drive success rate in the back half of the season. That's the percentage of your first downs you turn into another first down. So just think about how quickly they were off the field all the time. And the defense was 29th in average starting field position. And they were still the best defense in the NFL by some metrics over that stretch.
That is startling, man. That just makes no sense.
So the fact that we could have Sauce, the Williams boys, and the rest of those guys like on the field on 3rd and 8 against the Dolphins in week 18, like with a playoff spot on the line, I'm excited about that. I am excited for this defense to potentially matter in the grand scheme of things in the NFL because the way that they have played, they deserve that.
And in this division, they will get those moments. Like you said, you got to play the Dolphins. You got to play Josh Allen. We'll leave the Patriots. We'll get to them later. But you're going to play important games at the end of the season.
Most important supporting characters for you with this year's Jets team?
Pick someone off the edge that's not Hassan Reddick, assuming he plays at a certain point. Like one of these guys needs to step up. It could be Jermaine Johnson. Will McDonald is probably their best bet in terms of explosive traits. Obviously, they drafted him really high. Michael Clemens is a nice role player, but I don't know if he'll get to that level. But if one of those guys can take a step, that's a huge thing for them. And then just Olu Fashanu. Like if he, like we've talked about, he probably will have to play at some point this season just based on Tyron Smith's injury history. If he can maintain a solid level of play, that just goes such a long way.
I have guys up front too. Javon Kinlaw, Will McDonald, because we said they probably deserve the benefit of the doubt. Well, you got to do it. You got to get there, and you got to have 3, 4, 5, 6 guys because that's what has made them so devastating defensively over the last couple of years. Is they have those hockey lines along the line where you have those guys fresh all the time. They're all the best versions of themselves because of that. Can you have that sort of depth and that sort of pot from that group again? And I think the bet they made on Kinlaw, and then obviously where they took Will McDonald, Those guys have to be major contributors for you, considering how the rest of that room is now constructed. What counts as a successful season in your mind for this year's New York Jets?
You said all the eggs are in the Rodgers basket, so he has to at least look like a top 12. Do you think that's fair? Like a top, he's got to
I
look
think
like a
that's
top
probably
12.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So top 12 quarterback. And then in the world where he is a top 12 quarterback and the offense looks above average and the defense is what we think they're going to be, you got to at least get to the divisional. Like that should be the goal. If those two things work out, that should be your goal.
I think that is one step further than I need them to get. I think they need to make the playoffs. And I think that there needs to be confirmation that the collective optimism the world has shown about this defense with Rodgers was justified, because he's under contract next year. So if this goes well and you can coax him back, he's under contract and most of their young pieces are still pretty cheap. And so they'll have financial flexibility. So do we get to the end of the season when they're playing relevant games and they lose to Kansas City in the wild card round or whatever it ends up being, and we say, all right, that's fine. Like, that was a good season. That was an exciting season. Now, can we chase a Devontae Adams in the offseason? Can we go get a T. Higgins? Can we spend some of this money? And the last year where Rodgers is good and under contract and still playing at a reasonably high level, can we try to push this thing across the finish line? So I think you need to make the playoffs in order to justify that sort of mindset. I'm not sure you have to get further than that in my mind.
I think that's totally fair. I just get scared the older Rodgers gets. So I don't even know if like committing to that. I mean, obviously they'll
But
commit to him,
reasonably,
but
do you
it's
think this
just,
team can win the Super Bowl this year?
I mean, no. So I guess, but then I don't know. They're just, the whole thing they've done here is very weird. So I almost don't even know where to put it.
I guess there are paths where they can do it. Just if the defense is the best defense in the league and they are one of those like just kind of transcendent defenses, which I think is harder to do considering the talent up front. Like, I think they still have the guys to be very good, but I don't know if they have that dominant pass rush that can just change the way a season goes. And if Rodgers is playing at a top 12 level and the offensive line does stay healthy, maybe they make a move midseason for somebody, but I do think that they're probably a couple holes away from making this happen. So that's why I think by the end of the season, you just have to have that sort of mindset about what the runway looks like over the next 2 years.